All right. Well, hello, my friends, and welcome back to another episode of Land Stories Live with me, your host, Dave Deniston, where our goal here at Generation Family Properties LLC is to help hundreds of people just like you own land. Most of all, we want to tell your land story. Well, today, episode 44, we are going to continue to have special guests on the show that sell land in different areas than I normally do. Our guest today, he is a man that I have been seeing buying and selling land in Texas. So we're going big in Texas today. Now, I've watched him mostly from afar, so we kind of run in some of the same circles. We interact in groups together, but this is actually the first time we've spoken together. So this is fun for me to get to know someone new and learn about his journey. And of course, we got to talk land in an area that we've never owned land before. We're going to be talking about Presidio County, Texas. Please help me welcome Jason of Bana Properties and investinlandnow.com. Welcome, Jason.
Hey, thanks, Dave. Thanks. I'm glad to be here with you today, connecting. Thank you for the invite, and excited to talk a little more about buying and selling land.
Absolutely, absolutely. So, did I say the name of your company right? Do you say Bana,
yeah. Bana, yep.
Bana.
Bana.
So tell me about that name. Where does that
It's an odd name, you might think banana or something, but Bana actually means build and create in Hebrew. So that's something my wife and I have rental houses in another company under a similar name. And so we look at it like, we like to build, we like to create value for people and build a future for our children and our family. So we like the name.
I love it. Well, you mentioned Hebrew for create, and one of the things you were telling me that I had no idea before coming onto the show is actually you and your wife are missionaries. So you're from the U.S. and have family in the U.S., but you're living in Peru doing this.
Yeah. So we back and forth a little bit to the U.S. We're a cross-cultural family, you could say. My wife is originally from Peru, and so our kids have dual citizenship, but our main passion and our main focus, we have a nonprofit in Peru. We have a church that we started. We do local outreach. It's a developing nation, so there's a lot of physical needs, a lot of family needs. And so that's one thing that we do. We also travel to other Latin American countries and speak. And some of those that probably see on my Facebook feed, you probably see me teaching in Spanish and things sometimes. And we do a lot with family restoration and just sharing the love of Christ with people in a practical way. That's the way that we believe in be the change you want to see in the world, like Gandhi said. So that's our main focus and passion of kind of the why we do what we do. And then the investing is something that just helps us be able to do that.
Absolutely. So take me back to the beginning. Like, where'd you grow up?
I'm originally from Quincy, Illinois, which is a little river town on the Mississippi River, kind of right where Iowa, Missouri, and Illinois all come together. And I'm just a farm boy from Illinois. And then I traveled a little bit. I went to school in upstate New York, and then did a little bit of traveling in Latin America, which is how I kind of got into the missions and learned the Spanish and all that. Met my wife, and then we lived in Lynchburg, Virginia. I got a degree there at Liberty University, and we lived there for several years and started our family there, and moved back to Illinois. And then a few years back, we decided that we wanted to come to Peru and start this work. We were always involved in it, but we wanted to be here on the ground. And so we spend most of our time here, but we also have our home base, you could say, in Illinois, where my family is.
So tell me, you mentioned growing up a farm boy. So you grew up on a farm. Tell me about that.
Well, I'm from a farming family. I mean, I drove the tractors, spring and fall, nice. Planted, harvested. So it's a farming community. In the fall, you're either hunting or harvesting, pretty much. Yeah. But the farm, I would say the farm operations pretty much at this point, my grandfather passed away, kind of passed it on, and it's all being sharecrop now. So I'm not as involved in that anymore, but it's something that I learned the ethic and value of hard work, you could say. And then I worked as a contractor and a builder for about a decade. Actually paid my way through college doing that, which got me into real estate because I was, always remodeling, building, doing things like that. And finally I said, hey, this was back in the kind of the house flipping boom. Everyone was, on all the channels on TV. Oh, we got to flip a house. And so I started with that passion. I want to flip a house, And so I flipped many properties. I'm just actually sold a flip that we had done last year recently. And flipping was a good way to start building some capital. I was involved, but it was all the house world. The unfortunate part about flipping is it's like another job, because it's a lot of work. And first we did it all ourselves because I had the skills, but that's just extra work on top of your job, and you get to a limit there. But I mean, it can be a good thing to do for some people that want to start. I did find that I always overestimated my profits.
Yeah.
and the time it would take. It always takes you about 30% more time and money. But then we ended up deciding to keep a few of those houses as rentals. So we, would buy them, and we have a few rental properties. And that was nice. I like the idea, especially as I started to get involved here in Peru. And we do have churches and partners that are donors for our nonprofit. So, that has some funding there. But it's one of those things that I thought, I have 4 children. So thinking about my kids' future. And I have a good, my father actually helps me with the rentals. We work together on that. And we have a property manager back in Illinois taking care of that. And it's good, but it's a long play with rentals. There's a lot of expenses. There's a lot of maintenance. There's not always a lot of cash flow. I mean, it does positively over time. But a few years back, I was here in Peru working and very busy with what we were doing here. But I always have that investor bug, so I'm always reading, thinking, what can I do? And I love land. I mean, I grew up in a farming family, you're not a man if you don't own land. That was kind of grandpa's famous phrase, the Midwestern mindset. And so I read a Jack Bosch book called Forever Cash, and it talked about land investing. And I thought, this is great. I love the idea, especially how we do it online and invest in properties. And I also love the owner finance idea because there was a time where I couldn't get financing. I worked for myself. And I would have loved to have someone owner finance me, So that kind of put the bug, and then the ball got into motion. I took Seth's course, Seth Durari Tipster. He's a great guy, friend, and highly recommend his materials, just very educational. And then I got started in land investing, and there's been hit and miss. I've been off and on. I haven't always been focused on that. Last year, I was focused more on rental houses. I acquired some new ones. But this year, we've really been growing the business and investing in different states.
That's awesome. So what state did you start out in? Like, where did you
started in Florida.
In Florida?
With infill lots. I think I still have one property left in Florida available if anyone's looking for a Florida property. And I bought and sold several in Florida. And I really like that. Initially, I was thinking about promoting to the Latino marketplace because I know just from my experience in Latin America, a lot of people have a great mindset. They're working class and they like to invest in something for their future and their children's future. So I had a lot of friends that were interested in Florida. And so I started there, and I did actually sell several properties to Latinos there. But then I ended up kind of moving from Florida. I've done a couple deals in Arizona. I have a bunch right now in Texas, and I have actually a property coming in. I just purchased that we just closed on today. That's in Missouri, southern Missouri, kind of in the hills, but we're focusing a little bit less on infill lots now and a little more on acreage, small acreage and rural acreage. So 3 to 20, 30, 40 acres, on up. We'll buy anything if it's the right location and
sure.
People are looking for it. But that's kind of where we're at now. So
That's awesome. Well, tell me more about Texas. We had Sean Callahan on a couple of weeks ago talking about Florida and how Florida, there's all these weird rules with some of like the wildlife and stuff to be aware of.
Yeah.
What would you say, if someone wants to buy from you in Texas or anyone in Texas,
Mhm.
what kind of weird things pop up, if anything? What's unusual about?
Well, I think there's a couple things offhand, Dave. The first thing is I'm mostly right now in West Texas, and West Texas I think is a great place if you want to own rural land, because Texas is one of those states that doesn't have a lot of restrictions. I'm from Illinois. I think you mentioned you're originally from California. We know those are states that have a lot of restrictions.
Yes, they do.
And so a lot of people are looking, especially in the rural vacant land, they want something they can go put a cabin up on, hunt on, shoot on, ride ATVs on, a little bit of freedom. And so I kind of like to say the last free state when we talk about Texas. And I'm sure, I know Wyoming, there's other states that have a lot of, per se, freedoms. But it's definitely a place, especially in West Texas, that kind of the attitude is live and let live.
Mm.
And so there are big expanses of land. A couple things to look for. It's not easy to locate properties on the GIS. And so I have properties right now in Pecos County, Culberson County, Hudspeth County, Presidio County. It's all West Texas. And, it's open land. I would say it's very flat in like a Presidio or in a Pecos. But if you get down into Hudspeth and Presidio, there's some mountain ranges, some beautiful scenery. But it's not always easy when you're doing research on the property. A lot of these counties, I think they have low budgets. They have huge, land areas, but there's not a lot of population centers there, which is oftentimes what people are looking for in land because they want to get away from things.
Yeah.
But when you go on their website, if you go to Florida, you can find everything there. They have the satellite GIS maps showing the property lines. Everything's very clear and up to date. Whereas in a place like Hudspeth or Presidio, Texas, oftentimes you'll get on their website and it'll have, the tax information and stuff. Presidio, for instance, doesn't even have the tax information on there. You need to call the county.
Wow.
So, you can see it, but before you buy a piece of property, make sure you call the county and make sure there's not back taxes owed. Another thing is we buy and sell properties there. We'll send in the deeds and record them at the county recorder's office, but maybe it's a very small county. They only have a couple people on staff. So it might take them months to register the new property ownership on the assessor's site. So some people like to do their due diligence and hop on the county assessor site, which is a great way to do it and find out, who the property owner is and everything. But in a place like West Texas, it's very important to call the recorder's office and see who's actually on title, because maybe that's changed. They've sold it to someone or something's happened and it's not showing up there yet, just because they're rural counties. As to the GIS, it's kind of difficult in certain places. We have a guy on our staff that's he's actually a surveyor, and so he'll use the legal description and locate the property approximately for us before we buy it, and we offer those maps. It's not a survey, but it's a compilation study, you could say. Basically, we use the state, survey maps, and they overlay that into Google Earth and find approximately where the property is, because there's huge sections that have been divided in West Texas, a block of 640 acres. It's been divided down in 20-acre lots, and there's a plat, but maybe they've never done any actual surveys. And so, where exactly are your property lines? And so that can offer a great thing for someone who's looking to invest in, because someone like our company, we always try to do that research. We locate it, we find out where the easement is, if it has access, and we give approximate coordinates, which you can go out and kind of figure out where your property is. If you want to build on it, you actually need to get a surveyor to come out and, and stake it and everything. But you have to remember, we're looking at affordable rural land. And so those properties that are surveyed and fenced and staked and driveway and wells and all the stuff in them, those prices are through the roof, And so someone who's getting started, it's a good way to invest, in the future. I think a big thing that is a misconception that's very important, in Texas, at least in West Texas, you have typically, I will say typically and generally, because there could be a few pocket places differently, but typically you do have water rights, so you can drill a well on your property. And there are places like in Hudspeth, we have a lot of properties where El Paso, the city of El Paso, just had $100 million grant approved, and they're buying land like crazy there, especially around Del City in northern Hudspeth County near the New Mexico line, because they want water. The city of El Paso is growing. Where are they going to pump their water from? So they're buying large expanses of land so they can get the water rights to dig wells and then pipe it over to El Paso eventually. So it's a good thing to think about. Not a lot of people think about minerals in Texas, but what about water for the future? And so that could be an investment. And I know the properties that El Paso has bought, they've paid large amounts. I mean, $2,000 per acre, which is much over the market value in those areas. A misconception, I would say, that's important for someone wanting to invest is that do not assume that properties have mineral rights with them. So many properties in West Texas, which is the oil belt, most of your properties will not have oil rights. The oil rights have been divorced from a lot of these properties 50 years ago, 70 years ago, they've been sold off. And so even if you get a deed and it doesn't say, oftentimes on the deed, it'll say no mineral rights or, with this property, but there are properties that we've bought that don't say that, but you have to do a really deep chain of title search, and usually you'll find out that they don't have it. So I would just assume that it doesn't have mineral rights. There are a few cases, where it's been owned by the family for 100 years and they still have the mineral rights. In those cases, most generally, they're going to tell you it because they know it and it's very valuable. And mineral rights are bought and sold just like property in West Texas, and sometimes can bring even more than the property itself. Now, they're not always going to, put a well on there or anything because they do a lot of horizontal drilling and stuff, but it's something to keep in mind for someone that's wanting to invest there,
Well, one of the interesting things I had heard, and I don't know if this is true or not, but that like in Colorado, from what I understand and doing my due diligence there, like I don't have the mineral rights on a lot of my properties, but someone can't just set up a well on it. In Texas, I've heard that it is possible that if someone doesn't have the topsoil rights, they could drill without the owner's permission.
Yeah, it depends on how the mineral rights were transferred. And like I said, it's a very conglomerated or unclear, I guess is the word I'm looking for. It's a very murky issue, right? I do know that if you own the surface rights, because we've been approached, pipelines are going to have to pay to cross your property. And there is certain ways that they've transferred mineral rights that they could access, just depending on the wording of how that was sold off. Generally speaking, it's not going to happen. And so most of your oil companies, at least in the oil areas, will even look to buy the surface rights because they don't just put a small, I think there's some percentage limits of how much they could disturb of your property. So what happens if you have a 10 or a 20 acre property, when they set up for oil drilling, they're not just putting a tiny well on there in these areas. They have, catch basin, they have, everything set up. And so most of the time they have a 10 acre setup where they clear it and they gravel it and they put tanks and they run power in. And so in those cases, the oil companies themselves are just buying up the property. And a lot of times the properties are not that expensive in this area. So a lot of them will. And I have people contact me whenever we get new properties in these areas that are investors that are just looking to buy and hold on for this reason. So most of our customers are looking for a ranch or a little farm or some hunting ground. They want to set up some deer stands or do some riding or something for the future. But there are people that are on my mailing list that say, anything you get in this county, let me see it first, because if it's in the path of oil, and these are people that have oil interests that they already own.
Yeah.
So they know that if they have a plot and they already own oil interests, then they can market that. I think that's what they do, is they're marketing that directly to oil companies. But yeah, it's an interesting area
What
over
a
there.
what a thing, man. That's so cool. The other thing that I don't know if it was you, but someone had said that in a couple of counties that like and I think you referenced it a little bit, was that it can be hard to know where your property's at because
Hmm.
things aren't necessarily recorded with the county in the past, and
Yeah,
some of those rural
yeah,
counties can be difficult to deal with. Like you said, someone like yourself to dig it out and figure out what's going on saves a lot of time for someone that wants to buy land out there, you know.
for sure. There have been illegally subdivided. So illegally in the sense that they never actually registered it through commissioner's court, the plats. And so people bought off a block, and this happens quite a bit in West Texas, especially like El Paso and Hudspeth counties, and a little bit in other counties too. But that's where I faced it the most. Is they'll buy off a huge chunk, a section, 640 acres, give or take, and then they'll create or have a surveyor draw out a map, and they always put access in there, and then maybe not physical access, but there's a deeded access, so you can get to your property, and then they sell it off. And a lot of times this happened 20 years ago before everything was online. And so they sold it off to people as future investments, et cetera, et cetera. With the plan maybe of they were going to put that through commissioner's court and they were going to get it registered with the county, that plat. So when you or I buy the property, and the property legal description will say, for instance, township 3, block 4, section whatever, and then it'll have a lot number rather than the quarter section, half section like others. And it'll say a subdivision name and a lot number, but you'll go to call the county and they'll say, oh, we don't have a plat for that. There's nothing on register. Now, I'm not sure how the county actually, gave the deeds and certified all that. Most of this happened in the 90s and in the 80s. And so there seemed to be, they've of course, now everything's online and people are more diligent. I think it's easier. So I think maybe people were taken by that. And some of them might have been done in good faith. They just, maybe the developer died before he registered that or put it through, or something happened. But it's something that you do need to watch out for. In some of those cases, you can find a plat with like a local surveyor or the previous property owner got an original plat, which you can at least find your lot with. If you can't, though, you probably want to avoid those. And so it's something that first thing I do when people want to sell us land there is it's quite a process to locate it. And so, we have guys here. I have a guy and we do that in-house through the legal descriptions and things, as I mentioned. And sometimes we call the county, we get the plat, and we locate it. For just your average Joe, when you see somebody offering property, make sure that they've been able to locate that using a legal description or a plat on record. Otherwise, you could have an unknown piece of a 640 acre block and nobody knows. And another huge issue, Dave, is it's kind of the Wild West. So literally. So there's a lot of properties that we've bought, and I'm not sure if it's the ranchers that do this or if these are pre-existing before, these were lotted out and sold off. But most of this has fences. So there are quite a few properties where these huge sections of land are fenced off, and there will be fences going across the access roads, and they'll have some sort of a gate, but the rancher will lock the gate.
Yeah.
And it might be a legal access road, but it's, how do you get into it? I actually had a property recently we sold to a guy, and it had a fence around it. And so he was able to access to the border of it, but somebody had fenced that and some other neighboring sections off. I think probably just so their cattle could graze. And, he's like, well, and I'm like, well, we own it. So you just put in a gate, and fence it off yourself. But that's something, that could be a challenge in
bring some
different
bolt
areas.
cutters.
Yeah. Yeah. And most of the cases, I think where they let their cattle open graze and stuff, they'll have on the roadways in, they'll just have the cattle. I'm trying to see like bridges, just so where the road's open, but the cattle can't get out. And I
Yeah.
think they do that because a lot of people haven't actually went out and established their property lines and fenced it off or staked it off. It's no harm to have a few cows wandering over the grasslands. But when you buy that, it's something you have to consider. Is there access? Is there legal access? Is there physical access? All property has value in those areas for future investment. But if you're looking to use it, you want to know that you can access it. And that can be a challenge sometimes in these areas. So.
Oh, for sure. That's good. That's good stuff. Good stuff for everyone to be thinking of. Well, I'm going to share my screen here. Can you see it okay, Jason? All right. So we do a featured property, and we're featuring your property today out here in Texas. And this one is near Presidio in the in Presidio County, I believe, correct?
Yep.
So tell us a little bit about this property. Where do you want me to go?
You can scroll through some pictures, I guess. There, Presidio is right on the border of Mexico. It's actually this property is probably about a mile from the Rio Grande River. Right there's a Rio Grande there, and then it's interesting. A lot of people, Mexico border, doesn't that have a lot of cartels? Presidio and Ojinaga are considered like the calmest place along the border. There's no cartel traffic, very little movement there. It's just kind of a quiet little corner of the world. Very friendly people, small town environment. There's quite a few farms along the Rio Grande, as you can kind of see there. This property, it's has some views of the Chinati Mountains. So it's very scenic, very beautiful. You can access it. There's a couple different ways, just some dirt roads to get back there. The property is about a mile and a half in off the pavement. Be a perfect place for a getaway. There's a lot of mule deer hunting, different hogs and things in that area. A lot of people like to ride horses, keep horses, ranching type stuff. It's a 40-acre piece of property. So it's a very, very good sized property, one of our larger ones. It does have some hills on it. There's some flat areas. There's a seasonal, or what they call a wet weather creek in Texas. And so even though it's a dry area, there are rainy seasons, and they'll have a wet weather creek that would run during those times. This is an off-grid parcel, so there's power about a mile away. You could maybe put in a few poles and bring it out there. A lot of people invest in this type of property more for hunting, camping, riding, or a future, if the world goes crazy, maybe a future place you can get to. So you can see the topography there. There's some flat areas, and there's that wet weather creek there. But yeah, it's a nice size parcel. You don't find parcels this size in this price range very often at all. And so we're offering that particular parcel. Really good price on that one.
Cash price
is cash price is $10,897.
Wow,
and
that's a good price.
The only fee, there's no hidden fee besides the $99 closing fee. We're also offering finance. I like to do owner finance on properties. Contact me. We have $599 down, $299 a month. We'll work on you and other terms too. If you need, you can always contact us through the website. But it's a nice piece of property we got out there, one of the larger ones, and Freedom, West Texas, with some beautiful views. It's something you could look at and see if it's for you.
Well, and it's obviously 40 acres. I mean, I think that's about the size of 30 football fields, if I remember right. So I think it's about that conversion. So think about 30 football fields side by side by side by side. That's a lot of space.
Yeah, and walking that would take you quite a while. I know taking the photographer out there, walking, it takes a couple hours to really walk 40 acres of perimeter in that terrain. It's a pretty good sized piece of property, and cheap taxes too. That's one great thing in West Texas. I have a lot of people that, are looking to invest in West Texas, and they want something for the future, maybe a bug out place, or or something down the road. And you don't want something that's going to cost you, thousands of dollars a year in taxes. And so that's one great thing about this type of property.
$140 a year are the taxes on this bad boy. I pulled up a little bit on the weather out in Presidio, and great place for someone that wants to be a snowbird. They live up in Minnesota like me, want to warm up over the summer.
Mm-hmm.
Looks like average or over the winter, average temperatures, in February, you're looking at 60 something degrees on average, a high of 70. Same thing right now in November. Get of course a little colder, being a little more deserty than others. Um, Looks like there's no snow out there, but you do get rainfall, like you said, July,
Mm-hmm.
August, September. Isn't that
Yeah,
weird that the hot season is the rainy season?
yeah, it's kind of nice in that area that rain brings a break, I think, in the heat. And you could see in the pictures, I mean, there's some shrub and ground cover,
Yeah.
from the rains. One nice thing about Presidio is Ojinaga, which is the Mexican border town across the bridge, is a really, really quaint little place, kind of a getaway place. If you like a little bit of that culture, that laid back Latin culture.
Yes.
So a lot of people in that area really like the back and forth. You can go, and it's not a really heavily traffic crossing. So from my understanding, with a passport, you can get across pretty easy. A lot of people go to purchase during the day, do business, come back, things like that. So very, very nice little area. Um, Great place for somebody that's wanting, to invest in a future property, or maybe set up some kind of a ranch, or do something with it. There's a lot of things that you could do with something like that. I mean, a guy could go dig a well on it if he wanted, really.
You
Um,
could. You
there's a
could.
lot of things you could do. And the great thing about Texas and in that area is there's very few restrictions on this. So,
Well, I was reading a little bit about the history because I'm a history buff. I love history. And they were saying that this area has been established since well before 1500 BC. So
wow.
1500 years before Christ. And of course, you had some of the Aztec type folks coming up that way. So it's kind of a confluence because you had the Rio Grande River, but I guess there's also another river that goes through there. So the two come together in Presidio. And so it's been an area that, of course, Spanish conquistadors went through. It's been an area that some of the history of war went through here with the Americans and Mexicans fighting at one point in time. And so it's just full of rich history as you dig back. Apparently there are prehistoric fossils and rock art, and beautiful place to get away. And one of the things I love to do is stargazing. And from what I
Mm.
understand, this is an amazing place
Oh
to
yeah,
stargaze.
there are no large cities around. I mean, Presidio is a small town. Same with Ojinaga. So you just have open skies. It's you could see in the pictures there. You could see the mountains in the distance and the skies. It's just imagine the stargazing. A telescope would be a great thing. And it's fairly open country, so there is some brush cover and things. But a guy could take a property like that and clear off an area, and maybe set up a camp area or a cabin area. It'd be a great way to get off grid and relax, or clear your mind and
Yes.
reset your sleep cycles. Stargaze, and a lot of people like to do that. So it's a good property for that, for sure.
So, Jason, as we wrap up here, if folks were interested in the property, or they want to see other Texas properties you got going on, what would be the best way for them to contact you?
Yeah, if you go to investinlandnow.com, we actually have a bunch of new properties. Probably in the next 2 weeks, we'll have about 10 new properties on there, in Missouri and in Texas. If you go to investinlandnow.com, there's usually, I think the first time you get there's a little thing that pops up. You can sign up for our newsletter for it to be a VIP buyer. I think it's at the bottom of the page too. Um, and it will, the buyer's list, you can sign up, put your email in there, And then you won't, I'm not going to spam you up or anything, but whenever we get a new property, usually before we put it on the site or we put it out on Zillow or Facebook or anything else, we send it out to our buyers list, and a lot of people will go ahead and snatch those up quick off our buyers list. And we usually offer a discount to our buyers list too. So if it's something, hey, I'm interested in those areas and that type of land, rural stuff, we're talking about stuff that's a little bit away from everything. You can go ahead and get on our buyers list. If anyone has questions about a particular property or wants to talk to me directly, Bana Properties, all together, no spaces, @gmail.com. I'd be glad to answer anything I can.
All right, sweet deal. Well, thank you, Jason, for being with us. Do you have any closing thoughts? As you think about land, you think about helping people, anything you want to leave us with as we close this out?
Dave, I think the more I buy and sell land, I'm always tempted to keep more and more land, and I do keep some. And it's one of those things that, they, like Mark Twain said, buy land, they're not making any more of it. And I'm a history buff too. I was actually just studying recently the conquest of the Incas in South America. And it's amazing how the Spaniards, the riches, the encomiendas and the haciendas that they built, it was all based on the land. They made the land produce, whether it be mineral, gold, silver, whether it was food products. And so one interesting thing that I think is in the next several years and decades to come, the world population's growing, right? And owning land is a great way to invest in the future, because when you have land, no matter where it is, maybe a place like that, you'd have to put up a greenhouse, but you can make it produce. And so it's something for me, I always look at and think, it's a very steady, a very great way to invest in the future when you have land. It's a secure thing, no matter what craziness goes on in the world or in politics or whatever. So I always say that, if you're on the fence, and sometimes people are on the fence, or sometimes I think people think that there isn't affordable land out there. And guys like you and me are trying to help people get these type of deals. We're selling them at below market value. We're buying them in bulk at discount. But putting them in people's hands, it's a great way to get going. Don't stay on the fence. Once you own a piece of land, you're probably going to want to buy more.
Yeah,
is really how it usually works. But it's something that you have and you can leave to your kids. So for sure.
Well, and you can bug out, and with the properties you're talking about there in Texas, it sounds like there's no restrictions on what you can and can't do, which I know a lot of our properties we have, there's restrictions on camping or restrictions on taking an RV or trailer out or whatever. So for someone that really wants to get away and not have restrictions, sounds like some of Jason's properties would be awesome.
Yep. Yeah,
so
perfect for that.
So
reach out to me if you're interested, for sure.
Investinlandnow.com. All right, my friends. Well, Jason, thank you so much for being with us. It was fun getting to know you a little bit more, and definitely everyone check out his website. For Generation Family Properties and Land Stories Live, this is Dave Deniston. Would love to hear from you, my friends. If you have a story you want to tell about land and your experiences, feel free to hit me up, of course, on Facebook, or contact CONTACT @GENFAMproperties.com. Thank you so much, my friends. Have a good one. Bye-bye.